if you're listening again on the podcast, then we just finished the foundation of why foreclosure why foreclosure consulting is so important. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go into actually what foreclosure consulting is. So on the podcast, we're going to split that into 2 separate episodes. Okay. All right. So, well, what happens with foreclosure? Okay. And you're starting to notice a trend here, right? Like the trend with the tax sales is the jurisdictions aren't getting their tax money. So guess what? They're going to allow your house to be sold so they can pay the cops. Well, here in this case, the bank isn't getting their money. So they're going to force the sale of your house so they can get paid. Okay. And so it all comes down to making sure you pay your bills and helping people who can't pay their bills find other things to do so that somebody can put that property back into circulation, making money for the banks, making money for the jurisdiction. Or as I like to say, making money for my favorite investors. All right, so there's 3 phases of foreclosure profit that we're going to talk about today. The first thing we're going to talk about is the very first phase of foreclosure profit, profit. I don't know what other people I can put in there. And that would be distressed sellers. These are people who are struggling and they can't pay their bills. Or they're not struggling, but they just don't pay their bills. For whatever reason, they're not paying their mortgage. The next phase that we're going to talk about today, well, the next phase at all, and we are going to talk about it, is at the auction. So if you are a distressed seller for long enough, you have not been paying your mortgage, eventually the bank is going to get tired of not getting their money. They're going to force the sale of your house, and it's going to go to auction. That auction usually requires cash on hand, often that day, to buy the property. That's why they say cash is king. Okay. If nobody buys the property for what the bank needs them to buy it for, then the bank buys the property at the sale, and now it becomes what's called real estate owned, REO. So if the property gets to that point, then that's when you're going to see it listed in the MLS on realtor.com or any other listing like that as REO, short sale, or anything, some kind of language that's indicating that the bank owns this property, and they kind of already know that they're not getting the full loan value for it. So that's why a short sale is often required. Okay. If you don't know what a short sale is, don't worry about it for this situation. We don't need to know about it for foreclosure consulting, but go look at my real estate investing 101 class, and that covers what short sales are. And I think we did that class in January, if I recall correctly. Okay. Did I mention that? I think I did. Okay. Some states do not allow you to market to a homeowner in distress and tell them you're going to help them avoid foreclosure, or tell them that you're going to help them stay in their home, and still turn around and buy their property from them. Okay. So when I got my start in foreclosure consulting, I lived in Maryland. And the reason the Maryland Association of Professional Foreclosure Consultants was created was because they passed a law in 2007, which said if you use any kind of foreclosure consultant marketing, you cannot buy the house. And that's how a lot of investors were finding their properties. And so what the foreclosure consultant becomes then is a buffer between the homeowner and the investor who ultimately buys the property. Now, if you are in a state that doesn't require a buffer, then that's okay. That's okay. You can still use these techniques to help the homeowner. And then when they can't buy the house, or they can't sell the house, when they can't get their house caught up, or they can't sell it in time to avoid foreclosure sale, you can still swoop in and buy the house. However, we want to do it with a high degree of ethics. We want to do it with a high degree of ethics. We are not lying to people and kicking them out of their property. Okay. Not in this campus. That's other people. That's how other people teach real estate. That's not how I teach real estate. You don't need to do that kind of real estate to make money in real estate. You can do that kind of real estate and make more money in real estate, I'm sure. But I don't want to go to jail, and I don't want any of my students to go to jail. Okay. So a foreclosure consultant can be that buffer if needed in states where advertising to a homeowner in distress could land you in jail if you buy their house. Okay, so let's talk about the 3 phases. The first phase is distressed sellers, and that is our pre-foreclosure. This is when the homeowner isn't paying their bills. And some banks will work with you more than other banks, okay? There's a couple different things that the banks can do to help you through a tough time, okay? So I already talked about the forbearance. So let me just kind of summarize that one again for you. Or if you're listening on the podcast and it's a different episode, it's the previous episode when I talked about it, okay? What a forbearance is the bank says, okay, you don't have to pay your loan for a couple months, a month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever it's going to be. During COVID, I think it was like almost a year that people didn't have to pay on their mortgages. The thing about a forbearance, though, is that you don't have to pay, but when it's time to pay again, guess what the bank expects? The bank expects you to have all the money. And guess what most people in distress don't have when they haven't had to pay their mortgage? They don't have that money. And so the next thing that a bank can do is a modification. Now, the banks don't like to do modifications, and I listed it here first because that's what you want to get for your client if you can, okay? Most banks are going to push into a forbearance, but a loan modification is preferable, and it's also what a bank can do if the homeowner can't get caught up after a forbearance, okay? The loan modification, now you are actually changing the loan. So you are working with the bank to convince them to either refinance the loan when it really shouldn't be, really doesn't meet the best criteria for refinancing. And some of that is a little awkward in today's landscape, I'll admit, but like working with them to try to refinance the loan. Sometimes they can take your missed payments and boop, add them to the end of the loan. I haven't honestly seen banks willing to do that in a long time. Right now, the banks are really big on refinancing because that's where they're making a lot of money off of fees and interest. So you had a loan that was at like 2.5%, and now you fall into foreclosure. You're falling into distressed sellers. You're not able to pay your mortgage. Well, does the bank really want to keep you at 2.5%? No, of course not. They want to put you at 6 or 7%. It's the same amount of money out, but now they get to charge more. Yay, banks. Poor homeowner. All right. So if you can get them to do some kind of modification where they just kind of slide those payments to the end, that would be ideal. Another thing that we have to watch out for with this is sometimes the banks will say we're doing one thing, but when you read the paperwork, it actually says another thing. So when you're working with a homeowner in a pre-foreclosure situation, by that I mean they missed some payments, but they haven't gone to court yet. I'm not court. The bank hasn't pushed it all the way through the legal system yet. You want to try to help them modify that loan. You want to try to help them get caught up if at all possible so that they can avoid foreclosure. Now, this is where sometimes you have to bring an investor in because, again, usually by time somebody comes to a foreclosure consultant, they've already tried to do everything that they know how to do, and it hasn't worked. They've borrowed from everybody they know to borrow from. They've worked themselves to the bone trying to work extra jobs and trying to make ends meet, and it's just not working, and it's not working fast enough. Okay. So in those situations, it's probably advisable to bring in an investor if the property numbers work. Okay. And you can find an investor to take the property off their hands and prevent foreclosure. Now, here's something that is let me tell you why this became so predatory. Because what a lot of people did is they would promise, stay in your home, come sell your house to me and I'll turn around and sell it back to you with these better terms. Sell your house to me and I'll go ahead and rent it back to you and you can stay in your home. And as soon as that person signed on the dotted line, those investors pulled their house right out from under them. That's why so many states enacted laws that said if you consult with them to avoid foreclosure, you can't turn around and buy the house. Okay. So please be aware of the laws where you live. Okay. If they can't get caught up, then it's going to go to auction. If they can't get caught up themselves, if we can't get the bank to modify the loan, if they can't do a forbearance or any of the other tools available to them, or if they, like many homeowners that come to you, will have, they have already done that with the bank and the bank's like, we tired of it. Okay. If there's nothing that can be done to get them caught up, wait a second. I want to say something else on the pre-foreclosure stage. Okay. Sometimes there's not really a whole lot of equity in the deal. But what you can, so remember when I said you make your money when you buy. If you've got a property that's facing, the homeowners can't pay their mortgage and they know they're going to be going into foreclosure soon, you may be willing to find an investor, come in and get them caught up in exchange for buying the house. They'll buy the house from them. They'll put the money in to get the house caught up and stave off the foreclosure. And then they'll put a renter in who can make the payments. Okay. You might not be able to find those properties at the 70 to 80% off that we like to acquire properties at. However, if you can get a homeowner who's facing foreclosure to sell to an investor who can get the loan caught up, and you can have them skip, I don't want to say it, have the investor just take over the payments. Okay. So the house might actually be worth $125,000, but because the homeowner only owes $100 on it, and now because they've missed 3 payments, there's an extra $10,000 in fees and payments. So now an investor has to get into it for $110,000. You say, well, gee, JJ, that doesn't match your 70 to 80% rule of thumb, your Mayo, the max allowable offer. We always start with 70 to 80%. Well, if the investor can just come in and take over the payments, they might be willing to do that. Why? Because the payment structure is already in place. The loan is at a low enough percentage point or interest rate, and they know that they can get it caught up and get somebody in there who wants to rent to own it for a lot more. Okay. And so there's a lot of creative financing that can happen there. I want to bring this example up because sometimes those subject to deals, subject to the existing loan, sometimes those deals might be the only path out. And your job as a foreclosure consultant will be to help a client see that you've done everything you can to keep them in their house. And now it may be time to move on. And in those kinds of situations where that investor takes over the loan and then they make the loan current to stave off foreclosure, now what happens is the homeowner moves on with their life. The investor might give them $2,000 or $3,000 or $5,000 to move and kind of a cash for keys kind of thing, right? But now that loan that they had is now on a property owned by somebody else. And when that somebody else makes the regular payments, it's actually helping the credit of the person who was facing foreclosure. I know this is mind-blowing to some folks. This is what they call subject to. And if you are interested in it, I definitely want you to be involved with the creative financing. I think that's coming up next month or the month after. You definitely want to be on the creative financing class so you can see more about how that works. It's a very powerful technique that you can use sometimes when there's no equity or not enough equity, but you can just slide in and take over the payments. You're not creating new debt. Okay. I don't like creation of new debt. I don't even like taking on debt. But if you are helping them rebuild their life by paying down their debt for them in exchange for them giving you their house, I mean, like that's a win-win in many, many situations, plus a win for whoever it is that gets the property. Now, if none of these strategies that I've mentioned work, the next phase is when the bank gets tired of waiting, is going to the auction. So when we go to the auction, now the loan couldn't get caught up. They tried everything. Nothing's worked. Now the property is going to be sold. The bank's goal in foreclosing is to try to get their money back. There are other types of foreclosure. Last month, we talked about tax sales. Depending on the state you're in, if you're in a state that does tax liens, when you buy that tax and you wait out the redemption period, you now have a lien against the property for that tax, and you foreclose on that property to force the sale of the property to satisfy your lien, right? But in a tax sale, never mind. I'm not going to go into the whole tax sale thing. Okay. You can force the sale of the house, and if nobody wins, you get the house. Okay. And some states, you bid up what you would pay for the house in the first place, even when you're buying the tax. And then after the redemption period, you just go in and pay it. You don't even have to foreclose on it. There's a process and there's fees, but they'll do that for you. It just depends state to state. Okay. But there's a lot of different reasons that something can be foreclosed on. But the main reason is usually the bank wants their money back. Okay. But there are other kinds of liens where somebody who wants to go through all the fees of foreclosing can go through all the fees of foreclosing. If you're going to a foreclosure auction and you want to profit from buying the property, okay? So now let me make sure I'm delineating what I said here, okay? We talked about phase one. I guess for you guys, it'd be on this side. Phase one is pre-foreclosure. That's where a foreclosure consultant can come in and try to help the homeowner keep their home or connect them with an investor, or in states that allow it, they could be the investor that buys the home so that the homeowner doesn't have to go to foreclosure. If the homeowner goes to foreclosure, that property goes to sale. At the auction, cash is king. You want to buy the property and lock it down, and you have to bring the cash to the table, usually that afternoon, okay? What generally happens in those situations, though, is that the sale is going to be too low for what the bank needs for their insurance, and so then the bank will bid higher. And the bank will actually buy the property because the bank doesn't want to lose their money. And so they'll bid on the property, and now the bank ends up owning the property. It's what we call real estate owned. Okay, real estate owned, REO. So now when you go look in the listings, you're going to realize what REO is. Okay, and so REO is property that the bank owns, and the bank sells it just like anything else. Okay. It's usually sold through a realtor now. Back in the day when I got started in this, y'all, they weren't always sold through realtors, depending on where you lived. Like, you contacted the bank and you got the list of properties that were REO. It's a whole different landscape now, but yeah, today you'll see them listed out there on the in the MLS, and they'll say REO, they'll say short sale. And I did mention a short sale just to make sure I've closed that loop, because sometimes I get excited and I don't close the loop. The short sale is where the property has a loan against it, but you can't sell it for as much as the loan. So you could only sell it, for example, the loan is $100,000, but the most anybody's going to pay for it is $70,000. So you got to convince the bank to take $70,000 as if it's paid in full for the $100,000. Now there's a whole science and process behind short sales. And usually it's a month by month process, and you're looking for that sweet spot of the devaluation for the bank's insurance crosses what the investor's willing to pay for the property, and boom, now you hit a sweet spot and the bank accepts the investor's offer. Okay. We're not talking about that today. I took the class on it. I tried to do it once. It was too much paperwork and too much headache for too little value. I said, I like my other ways. Everybody finds a way that works for them. I know people who do short sales, and that's all they do, and they make good money and they have properties. I do other things. I make good money and I have properties. It's all good in the hood. All right. All right. So you might say to yourself, okay, now that you've explained that, how do I actually profit? Clearly, in the pre-foreclosure phase, the homeowner is not going to be able to pay me. If they could pay me, they would pay the bank, right? Okay, so you can help the homeowner in a couple ways depending on the timeline, and you can charge the homeowner in some states, most states. And you can, if you can't charge the homeowner, you can find local helping agencies to help. And I mentioned in many states, in a growing number of states, you cannot buy the property if you start off consulting them on their foreclosure. But in some states, you still can buy the property. Okay. And so if you buy the property, well, that kind of becomes your payment for working with them, right? The discount you get on the property, right? The fact that you get the property at a discount, right? In other states where you can't buy the property, the investor who buys the property can pay your foreclosure consulting fee. Guess what the foreclosure consulting fee is a lot like? Oh, it's a lot like a wholesaler's fee, except it has a fancy new name, and I may have done a little bit extra work to earn that fee, right? See, that's why I started off with the description of bird dogging and wholesaling in the beginning, so that you would understand how that process worked, because it's almost the same thing with foreclosure consulting. I'm working with this homeowner. They can't sell the house. They can't get it caught up to stay in the house. Here's what they'll be willing to sell it for. Here's the terms upon which they'd be willing to sell it. And in those situations, now you're a foreclosure consultant, but you're really acting in the capacity as a wholesaler. With the difference that instead of a wholesale fee, it's a foreclosure consulting fee. And so you want to make sure that if you are helping someone in pre-foreclosure, that you understand very clearly how you are going to get paid. All right. You want to make sure you understand how you're going to get paid. And sometimes if you're just starting out, like when I was starting out, this cracks me up. When I was starting out in a new state, so I had some clout and some status in Maryland, but I moved to a new state. And in this new state, one of my first people that I worked with, we got her house taken care of. She was able to round up the money from some friends. And her bank was like one of the worst. There's some banks that you're like, yeah, I already know this is not going anywhere. But her bank was one of the worst, but we were able to get things together, got it all figured out, got her good to go. Well, because I had just moved there, I wasn't even charging a fee, especially if they didn't sell the house. All I was asking for was testimonials. So this person comes back to me a year later, they're facing foreclosure again. We staved off the foreclosure the first time, but they didn't implement the financial principles, and they stopped coming to the monthly classes. So I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't help it so much if you're not going to help yourself, right? Well, they come back to me a year later, and I'm like, well, I would love to help you, but you never fulfilled your end of the contract. You were supposed to make me a video testimonial of how I helped you. Send me that video and we'll get you back into the queue. She never sent the video, y'all. And I was like, I wasn't even asking for payment. I just needed to build my business in a new location. So I was charging videos. Now the ones that went to investors, yes, they had a foreclosure fee, a wholesale kind of fee, right? But the ones where the homeowners were working with me directly and they weren't selling their property to an investor, all I wanted was a video. Well, in that region, you just don't share your troubles. So people didn't want to do it. So I was like, well, you out. You got my one-time good help. Anyway, that's pre-foreclosure, okay? How do you profit from helping at the auction? Honestly, you're not really helping anybody at the auction. This slide is probably poorly named because you're actually not really helping anybody at the auction. But what you're doing at the auction is you show up with your cash or your check. You've done your research and you know what you're supposed to pay for this property, and you're not going to pay more on that. So then you profit by turning around and putting that property back into use so that you can profit from it. In the REO stage, again, you're not really helping anybody but the bank, but you do work the process and you buy the property. But again, at both the auction and the REO, we do not overpay for properties. Okay, let me say it again. Do not overpay for properties. I don't care how excited you get. You do your research and you determine that property is worth $100,000. Maybe you go up 110, man, 120. Don't you dare go up to 170 or 200. I have seen people at the auction pay twice what the property is worth because they got so caught up in the frenzy. And of course, the bank is going to let them do it. You know, the bank is going to love it. Love it. But you're not going to love it later on when you're stuck with a property you paid $200,000 for. It's only worth 120. When you got stuck with a property that you paid $40,000 for, it's only worth 20. Okay? I've seen it. I've been at the auctions and I've seen it. Okay? All right. Yeah, I probably need to retitle that slide. That's not a very good slide. You're helping in the pre-foreclosure stage. That's really the only time you're actually helping the homeowner. Okay? All right, so I made 2 promises to you today, okay? I made a promise that you could go out tonight and start researching these things, go to the courthouse. You can take what I've learned and you can go out on the web. A lot of jurisdictions put their foreclosures and stuff out on the web. You can go out and find the next month's foreclosure sales, or you can go, depending on where you're at, you can either do a list that sells pre-foreclosure lists, or you can simply go to the courthouse. You know, the best way to do it is to go to the courthouse. Now, where I used to, when I was in Maryland, you could go to the courthouse every day, and every day they had a book, and that book had a list of who didn't pay their mortgage that day or that month. Every day was a new list, and it was just added to the book, and you could go through and you could get all those addresses. Well, what will you do with all those addresses? You'll do what we talked about in the Wholesaling 101. You'll research them. You'll try to contact the homeowner. You'll try to work with them as a foreclosure consultant, or if you're in a state where you can't do that, as a wholesaler. You don't even have to tell them you're a foreclosure consultant, but you can use the knowledge of the foreclosure process to make sure that you're able to profit, okay? And a lot of that research, if your jurisdiction puts those loans, those defaulting loans online, you can do a lot of that research today, and you can find the people that are in foreclosure, and you can do the research you need to do, and you can build that muscle. You can build that foreclosure consulting muscle now, so that when we have greater number of foreclosures, that you are poised and positioned to take advantage of the situation. Take advantage is the wrong word. That's the wrong phrase I meant. But I hope you know what I mean. You are helping others by helping yourself and helping whoever ultimately gets the property. It's a win-win-win. Okay, the other promise that I made to you is that you can dig deeper with scripts and role play and how to find the homeowners and the investors. Okay, so that's a big part of this training, is the overview of the process, yes, but how do we find these people? How do we find investors that are going to buy these properties if we don't buy them, if we're in a state that doesn't let us buy them? What do we say when we get them on the phone? How do we even find their phone numbers in the first place? How do we delineate ourselves from the millions of other investors in some markets that are going to email, mail, call these people as soon as they show up on a foreclosure list? We talk about all of that in our 2-hour workshop that's going to be on May 31st. That is a Saturday morning, and you can go ahead and sign up for that at jjclink.com/FC. Now, please don't forget, wait, let me say that again, jjclink.com/FC. Now, please do not forget that this is our annual Global Youth Initiative fundraiser, so we appreciate your contributions of any size. It's all the same place. It's all going to the same place. You can go to bit.ly/lovehelping. That takes you to my charity page on my old storefront, which I probably need to update, but the charity page is still valid. Or you can PayPal Minister Wiggins at gmail.com, but also you can use the handle Queen of Cashflow. That's on Queen of Cashflow is on Venmo, Cash App, and PayPal. Okay, so all of them are Queen of Cashflow, and that will get the money to me. Okay, if you need a tax deductible way of actually making a donation instead of contribution, let me know. To be real, the way that the Trump's first administration changed the donation rules, it almost doesn't matter for most people anymore. But if it does matter for you, let me know. We'll actually the church is one of our fiduciary sponsors for the Global Youth Initiative, so they can receive the funds on behalf of the children and cut you a tax donation letter. Okay. All right. This is our fundraiser, so please support us if you found this information valuable. All right, one last time, I want to invite y'all to the workshop, and I'm going to let you nug on that for a second while I check the comments. The bottom line is foreclosure consulting can be an excellent way for you to help people while helping yourself get out of debt. It can be an excellent way for you to learn about the real estate market while you're helping people, and it can be an excellent way to build bridges between where you are today and where you want to be tomorrow with real estate investing, because it puts you in contact with investors who have already walked the walk and already can talk the talk and can teach you and mentor you along the way. It's a wonderful, wonderful technique for those of you who are getting started in real estate investing. And if you are interested in learning more about foreclosure consulting, please, sir, please, ma'am, join us Saturday, the 31st of May at 10 a.m. Now, if you are not going to be able to give up that Saturday morning, that's okay. Your $49 also covers lifetime access to the recording. All right. And if you once you buy it, you'll get the Zoom link. And then after the Zoom is over, you will get the link to the Zoom right into your email box, and you can look, whoa. Let me tell you what I'm about to say. You will be able to actually download the training for yourself. Yes, not just available on streaming. Now, a lot of my classes are on streaming, but this one, you will actually be able to click download and download the video to your computer. Why would I do that? Because this is such an important topic, and we need more ethical people who are trained on being foreclosure consultants who can help these homeowners out when they're in this jam and help also everybody. It's a win-win-win. I just can't emphasize that enough. We need more good people with this skill set. So you'll be able to click the button and download the video to your computer, and you won't ever have to worry about if Vimeo goes out of business or YouTube goes out of business or any of those things make it hard for you to get your video. You will have it on your hard drive as well as access to it in our portal. So y'all, don't delay. Get in on that today, because once we finish editing it, it will definitely not be $49. It's probably going to be $199. All right, well, that's everything I have for y'all today. I'm going to go ahead and sign off for tonight. Y'all take care and be blessed.